Hello, welcome to the Virtual Village Hall and the first in a series of artist-inspired printmaking sessions with me, Rachel from I Printed That. So the first person we're going to look at today is the printmaker and pop artist, Andy Warhol. So I think it's so important to look at other artists because we can learn so much from them, from their style, from the processes that they use, and we can take a little bit of that and then we can make it our own and incorporate it into our own artwork. Now, today's session isn't about getting the perfect print. In fact, Andy Warhol enjoyed the imperfections that hand printmaking created. He enjoyed printing the same image over and over again. So as I said, it's not about that perfect print. It's about exploring the process of screen printing, enjoying, just learning a little bit. So that's what we're going to do today. We're just going to have a bit of fun and we're going to learn how to screen print using some really basic materials. So if you're up for that, let's talk you through how this session runs. I'm going to first start by showing you how to make a screen and also what you can use as a squeegee. All the equipment that you'll need are listed today in the explanation to the video above. Then we're going to do a warm-up exercise that just gets us used to using the screen, playing around with the techniques a bit. Then we're going to do a couple of exercises that explore colour and also detail. So if you're up for that, and I hope you are, please join me and I will just pop you down and we will get started. So we're going to start today with a very simple print. We're going to begin by printing some apples, and then at the end we're going to reprint over those to get this detail. But the first thing is really, really simple. So let's make that screen up. So I have here an embroidery hoop. You can also use screen printing equipment for this. That works absolutely fine. You could even use a photo frame that you've taken the glass and backing out of, and you can staple fabric, very fine fabric or tights to it. So I'm going to show you how to use a pair of tights and this embroidery hoop to make a screen. So the first thing you need to do is to remove the legs. So just take off the pants part of your tights, just cut through with scissors. Then we're going to remove the feet. This is a great way to reuse a pair of tights. If you've got a hole or a ladder, just make sure that the bit that you're going to be using doesn't have that hole or ladder. So rather than just throw them away, make art out of them. So you'll then have your two legs. Then I want you to cut through those. So just fold them in half and then cut through. And then the same with the other tights. So you've got 4 pieces, and now we just need to cut down what would be the seams. Just go nice and steady. If you're just joining us, I'm just randomly cutting up some tights. No, it's not that random. It's actually for a screen printing session today. So we're going to be screen printing using Andy Warhol, the artist and printmaker, as our inspiration. If you're watching along today, please do pop on the comments and say hi. It's always lovely to know where you're watching from. If you're printing along, give me a thumbs up. Now, if you haven't got time to print today, don't worry, all of the videos are saved on the Virtual Village Hall Facebook page. So you can come back at any time and watch them. Or you can click the save button, and then your video will be saved and you can come back and watch it later. So I'm just going to carry on cutting through the seams of the tights. And if you're watching on record, then you can always pause and rewind and fast forward if you need to. And of course, we always love to see the prints that you make. Anything that you do that you've been inspired by to do on the virtual village hall, we love to see your work. So you can also put your photos and videos in the comments too. So last one. So you should now have 4 pieces of tights. So loosen your embroidery hoop. The embroidery hoop will depend on the size of your tights, so just bear that in mind. I then put the tights onto the table. This is quite good if you've got someone else there to give you a hand, but you can do it on your own. I'm going to show you how. So tights on the table, the smaller hoop on top, and then you're going to bring those 2 sides together and then just hold it with your thumb and your forefinger. Bring the other side round, hold it in that grip, bring the other side round, hold it in the grip again, put the larger hoop onto the table and then slot the smaller one inside. Now I would say that that's the most difficult thing you're going to do today. It does take a little bit of practice, so if you're watching and repeat, you can pause at this point if you need to either go and get someone to help you, or if it keeps flinging back up, because it will. But make sure that screw is really, really tight, and then you want to pull those tights so that they're very tight, but without laddering them, because you don't want to make any ladders on the other side. And that is your basic screen. So it's a frame with a very fine mesh fabric over the top. Now I don't tend to cut these bits off because I like to reuse these tights again and again, and if you cut them too close to the embroidery hoop, then sometimes they slip under and it's very difficult to get it back in. So I just either fold them out the way, or you can even just get some sewing pins and just pin them out the way. That's our basic frame and screen. Then to print with, we're going to use a squeegee. But before that, we need to make up a stencil, because screen printing is what's known as a resist printmaking technique. And to do that, we're just going to use a very simple paper stencil. There's lots of different ways that you can do screen printing, but this is by far I would say the easiest and the quickest. I'm going to ask you to use 2 bits of paper, because we're going to cut 2 of the same shape, and we're going to cut an apple. Now I'm sure you can draw a simple apple shape, but there is a reason that I'm going to be using an actual apple to draw around. All will become clear later. So just take your apple and a sharp knife and cut right through the middle. There we go. So I'm going to take 1/2. The other one can be wrapped up in cling film, and I'm going to have that later. Then just make sure you with a kitchen towel, just dry the apple slightly so it doesn't get too wet on your paper. Take a pencil, flip the apple onto the paper. Make sure it's in the middle because we need a good amount of room around the outside. And I'm going to draw around the apple. Like so. Just finish those lines off. And make sure you know which part of the apple you've just drawn around. That will become important later on. And I'm just going to give the apple, just with freehand, just draw a stalk. And also, if you like, you can draw a leaf. So now we're going to make our stencil. And screen printing, as I said, is a resist printmaking technique. So you need something that resists or stops the ink from getting through. And in this case, we're using paper. And as any other stencil works, where the holes are in the paper, that's where your ink's going to go, or your paint is going to go. So I'm just going to use a craft knife just to cut my apple shape out. I'm cutting through both sheets of paper. Just take your time, nice and slow. And move the paper rather than moving yourself. There we are, so we've cut out the silhouette. This part we don't need, but we still need to keep this part. Then just carefully cut out the leaf. And the stalk. And I actually think that stalk's a little bit too big, so I'm just going to make it a bit thinner. So keep those paper together. And there we have our apple stencils. So for the first one, I'm going to print onto coloured card, which I have here. So I've cut myself 4 different pieces of card, just squares, and I'm going to print in a yellow on each one. And then at the end of the session, we're going to come back, we're going to reuse our apple, and we're going to print in a slightly different colour, in a bit of a pop art colour, onto each apple again. But this is just a warm-up exercise just to get you used to using the screen. And to do that, take your first colour, position your stencil on the paper, make sure those tights are pulled nice and tight. Place it so the flat part is down and making contact with the paper. got your paint. You've got your credit card that we're going to be using as a squeegee. And I'm just going to apply the paint just above the cutout. And you'll get to do a practice of 4 of these, so don't worry if it doesn't come out the first time. And as we said, we're going to embrace all those imperfections. You need to hold the credit card just off of a 90-degree angle. Push down firmly but not very hard. Just pull that paint towards you, and that's going to go through the hole that you've cut. And I just need a little bit more paint, so let's just bit more paint on. As you can see, part of it didn't take there. Push down, and there we have. Going to lift the screen and the stencil, and there we have our first print. So let's together do the next few prints. Position your stencil again. I think I should have cut my paper slightly bigger. Screen back on. Let's go in for another one. Go, that's our second print, and we've got some nice bleeding down there as well, which is great for our Andy Warhol effects. The third print. So you should be getting a little bit more confident now. I'm going to take this one back the other way because that's where most of my paint is. There we go. And then the yellow on the yellow, we'll see what this one turns out like. So that's the last print. There we go. So how did you find that? Was that okay? Would you like to do some more? Okay, so what you need to do is just remove the tights. And if you've got a sink nearby, then just give them a wash out. You can quickly dry them with a hairdryer if you want, or you can leave them to dry. So I'm just going to put them in a bucket of water that I've got next to me, and I'm going to use my other tights for the next one. But those, they can be reused, so they don't need to be thrown away. You can use them for more prints later on once they're clean and dry. So let's set up for our next screen, our next print. So the screen, again, you'll get lots of practice at this. I'm going to hold it in the middle, from the edges. Place it into the larger hoop. Quickly tighten it up before it escapes. And then make sure it's nice and tight. So we're going to use the second stencil, the apple stencil that we cut out, and we're going to base this on the logo that Andy Warhol designed for Macintosh. So it's a logo that we're all really familiar with. It's the apple with the bite out of it. Now, unfortunately, due to copyright, I'm not able to actually show you the image, but what I've done, I've set up just a little sort of image pack with some links so you can see all of the images that I'll be referring to, and I'll put that in the comments. So this is called Apple 359, and it's from it was designed in 1985. So this is what we're going to be doing next. We're going to be using a series of colours put onto our screen, and then we're going to be using the squeegee to bring them across and then print over and over again and get some of these great colour merges. So grab a piece of paper. It could be a colour piece of paper. This one's just a cream piece of paper. Any colour really. Get your stencil from before. And I'm going to lay it just to the side, so just to make it easier for me when I'm pulling the print. Lay the screen on top. Make sure it's tight. And then I'm just going to add my paints. So in this print, Andy Warhol used sort of a rainbow effect, but he didn't go for the true rainbow colours. He went green, yellow, he went orange and red. I'm going to mix some yellow in with that to make that one more orange. Excuse me. He then added a blue. And not a green. And then it's kind of like a violet, but I haven't really got that. So I'm just going to go with blue. Again, it's just experimenting with the different colours. So we can use the same squeegee. Just give it a quick clean. And then using the same technique, using the same technique, we're going to bring all those colours towards us. Through the screen. go over a couple of times just to make sure it's gone through. And then the moment of truth. Ooh, we pick it up to reveal our print. And I love the way that you can see the weave of the tights. So you get this great digital effect. You get these bleeds. And then what we're going to do is just print it just a couple more times. Just really play with those effects. Just see what all those different colours do. And you can move your squeegee, your credit card as you do it. Add to those colours. So I've gone for quite dark colours, but you could go for those lighter colours and they'll really pop. Oh, that just looks like a splat. I love it. It looks like the apple's just been thrown down, and you've got these almost sunset colours just towards the top. It's almost like a sea, sort of a seascape. Brilliant. So I think I'll just do one more, and then I think that's really that's that stencil done with. So try different colourways. I'm always amazed by how different print can look in different colours. This is really just using up the last of that paint. So this is really just an experiment, just seeing what we end up with on this final print. There we go. So that's a real kind of silhouette one. Yeah, so it's interesting to look at the different colorways. So these ones are kind of like, you know, kind of brighter, sort of more acid colors, and then we've got these really dark ones. So it's just seeing that the contrast there. Okay, so that's the apple prints done. So now we're going to move on to the screen print that Andy Warhol did called Soup Cans. It's probably one that you've seen before. He took just an ordinary everyday item and he turned it into art. He printed with it, he made up a screen, and then he printed again and again and again. And we're going to use this as the basis for our next print. So this one's a little bit more complicated. This one with the first one we had just a simple outline. With this one we're going to put a lot more detail into it. And if you're ready, let's get started on that. So this we're going to need to do a little bit of drawing. Start with paper again. So as I said, all the equipment that you'll need is in the explanation to this video. This paper is like a plain newsprint. It's the stuff that they wrap your fish and chips up in. You sometimes, if you buy any ceramics, they'll often get wrapped up in this. It's got just a slight sheen to it. You can also use greaseproof paper. I wouldn't use printer paper because that does absorb all the water in the paints. You can also use glossy magazine paper. You need something that just sort of is slightly not waterproof, but sort of it doesn't absorb the water straight away. So before I cut, I'm actually going to set up my next screen. So we'll get rid of our apple one, and we put another part of the tights that we cut up earlier into our screen. So you'll be a dab hand at doing this by the end of the session. those tights through. Let's try that one again. So it's good to be prepared when you're printing. Always kind of try and be a few steps ahead. So make sure your screen's ready, make sure your squeegee's clean, that you've got your paper to use, that you've got the right colour paints out as well. So we're going to do that even before we start making our stencil. Clean my squeegee. Okay, so for this one, just draw around your embroidery hoop because you don't want your image to be too big, but we want it to be about in the middle. We're going to do, you're welcome to trace something, but I'm going to show you just a quick way to draw a soup can, or a tin of soup as we might say here. So just draw a basic rectangle shape and then just curve off the bottom. It gives us that 3D effect. Then we're going to do the same at the top. And then just add that elongated rugby ball shape. Make those lines a bit thicker, so able to see them when I'm cutting. And then this is the image that we're working to. So in about the middle, I'm going to draw a curved line to go with the shape, the round shape of the tin. I'm going to put an emblem in the middle. I'm just going to go for a simple star shape. And then I'm going to, just in block writing, write the variety of our soup. Just redo that slightly. Put the spacing a bit wider, I think. And then we just want to add the grooves to the top of the tin, and then we just do that like that. So to make it easier, I'm just going to go over my lines with a dark pen so I know which lines to cut. Again, these ones I can see quite clearly. Now it's time to start cutting. And all you need to do is remember those basic principles of screen printing, that it's a resist printmaking technique, that where the paper is, that will resist the ink from getting through. So where the holes are in your stencil, that's where the ink will get through. So I'm just going to have this to the side of me so we can use it as an example, so we know what we're cutting out. And I'm going to start just by cutting with a craft knife just the silhouette. With any stencil for screen printing, that's how I generally start. And this is the bit we need, so keep that to one side, and then we're going to work on all the details here. So for this bottom part, the soup, the word soup is going to be cut out because that's where we want our ink to go, and then this bit of paper is going to be left because this will need to resist. But you see at the side we want this sort of line. We need to cut this just slightly smaller so that when we place it back down into our stencil, that line is open for the ink to go in. Sometimes it helps to put it on a black or a dark background. So what we'll do before we print, I'll put it on this, I'll move this craft board to one side and we'll put it on the black card so that you can see a little bit more clearly. It just helps sort of get it in your mind, fix it in your mind where that ink's going to go. Okay. So I'm just going to trim this part. This is still the bit we need. And then just spend a bit of time removing those letters. Okay, I'm not going to throw those letters away just yet. We don't need all of them, but I'm just going to keep them to one side because there's a part that we do need that I'm going to show you next. Again, save that one. Because the O and the P have got these inner parts, these bits we also need. Now, I've been referring to this as a stencil, but you'll see that it's not a stencil in the traditional sense of the word, because with a stencil, if you sort of think about the alphabet stencil, the O, for example, has little kind of bridges to either side, because this part can't just be floating. But with screen printing stencils, it can be, because everything lays flat on the surface and then the screen holds everything down. So you can, if I just show you, you can just put the stencil down and just have that floating in the middle. Everything will hold it down and that will print. So that's one thing to remember. So I'm going to keep that just to one side, make sure I don't lose it, and keep that to one side as well, and just cut that final P. Oh, it's a fiddly one. And then we can work on this piece. So again, with this to the side of me. So all of this part is cut out, so I can do away with this, but I need the letters because they're going to act as my resist. So I'm going to cut the top right off. I'm going to cut out my circle. At the moment, I'll work on that in a second, and I'm just going to cut out each of these letters. Oh, keep the lid as well. Those smaller letters from the word soup, they can be put to one side now. I don't need those anymore. So this is quite a good one as well, because it shows you the different ways to do it, how you can have it so that the letters are in the colour of whatever you're printing onto, and also how the letters can also be in the paint colour that you've chosen. This one I also find it slightly easier to use scissors as well. It can be a bit fiddly with the craft knife. That's it, so we've got our last two letters. There's our letters done. So with the star, that's in the colour of the paint. I'm going to cut the star out. And then we just need to trim just slightly around that. So we can have this open part here. Finally, the lid. And that's just a case of cutting the outside and moving that to one side. And then cutting the middle out. And I will actually just trim this down slightly. To put inside. That then is all my stencil cut out. I hope you're doing okay. And I'll just very quickly show you how you can just check everything's okay before you print. And you'll see what I mean, just by laying all your items onto a dark background, and you'll be able to see how they come out. So that's looking good. Got my piece of paper ready to print onto. And I just have to place all the bits back on. I try not to be too precious about it, but sometimes it is just help just to use sort of a knife or possibly a pair of tweezers if you just want to get things nice and straight. So, put my lid on. Oops, I've moved it. In the middle. You can tell that's not going to lay straight. There we are. It's fine. Actually, just looking at it, I think it does just need another bit here. So I'm just going to, one of those bits that I took out, I'm just going to put that back in. That's the beauty of this. If you do lose a bit, or you kind of feel, oh, it just needs something else, you can just cut another piece. It doesn't have to have been from that first full piece of stencil that you did. Let's drop my letters in. Go. Yeah, I'm happy with that. So put the screen on top. You're used to doing this now. And I'm just going to go in with some black. My squeegee ready, in the form of a credit card. So this is quite big, this this stencil in relation to my card, so I've just gone over it a couple of times. And then lift the stencil and paper up. Oh no! So all those little bits of paper have stuck, but all you need to do, if you want, just wait for it to dry completely. But what I'll do, just so you can see, it's probably best to wait for it to dry, but I can just take them up one by one just while it's wet, and then you'll be able to see. So if that's happened to you, don't panic. Don't panic, you haven't printed all the way over. It's just those little bits of paper are still stuck on. There we go. Oh, and I love this. Again, we've got this sort of bleed, which for the purposes of the prints that we're doing today, which are very sort of like Andy Warhol, and we're, you know, we're embracing those imperfections. That's perfect. I really like that. And again, if you look closely, it looks very digital because of the weave of the tights. Oh, and my O and my P as well need to come out. There you go. So there we have our Andy Warhol inspired soup can. So that's how you add detail to your screen print. We've talked about colour merges, we've talked about detail, and now we're just going to go back to those first prints that we made using our apples. And we're just going to finish them off. So I've got the same apple that I used to make the initial outlines with. I'm going to mix up some darker colours. To add a bit of detail in the middle. So let's make up a bit of a purple colour. And I'm going to make up pink as well. When you mix colours, always mix light or dark into light, because it's always easier. You use less paint adding the dark colour than you do if you mess it up and then you have to add loads and loads of light. Just a little bit more. And then I think of blue as well. So to get the detail, I paint over the apple, making sure you get the sides as well, get that outline. Don't have to cover it completely, just those bits that you want to pick out, like that. Placed it onto my apple and you'll see why you wanted to use the same part of the apple. There's a nice one to do for the children as well. And then there you have the detail for your apple. I'm going to wipe that off. Going with another colour. Same again, and then just carry on cleaning off and then adding more paint and printing as you go. And then don't throw this apple away. You can just cut off the piece that you've used, that can go in the compost, and then you've got the rest of the apple, because I don't really like waste, so we don't have to waste that an apple for our art. And obviously we've got the other half, which I'm going to enjoy after this session. So I hope that you've really enjoyed working through an artist with me, Andy Warhol, looking at some of the techniques he used, and also, you know, making it your own, taking some of that inspiration. So thank you so much for joining me, and I look forward to seeing you again next time. Take care. Bye.